The pre-dawn light crept through the warehouse windows like a thief, casting long shadows across rows of metal shelves that stretched into infinity. Here, in the heart of a military logistics complex just outside Phoenix, Maria Rodriguez existed, in a world suspended between motion and stillness. Her hands moved with a rhythm that spoke of muscle memory honed through years of relentless practice. Loading magazines was more than a job. It was a meditation, a survival skill etched into her very DNA. Each magazine was a story, each round a memory. The warehouse wasn't just a building. It was a battlefield of a different kind, a place where survival meant precision, where every movement could be the difference between success and catastrophic failure. Maria knew this better than most. Her hands, strong and calloused, told a story that most would never understand. She remembered her grandfather's voice, rough as desert sandpaper, cutting through the memories of her childhood. Precision isn't just about hitting a target, Mia. It's about understanding the weapon better than it understands itself. Manuel Rodriguez had been more than just a border patrol agent. He was a legend in the small, dust-blown town where Maria grew up, a man who could field strip a rifle blindfolded, who understood that survival was a language spoken in metal and mechanics. He'd survived cartel encounters, border tensions, and decades of unpredictable danger, and he'd passed every ounce of that knowledge to his granddaughter. The warehouse around her was a cathedral of military logistics. Ammunition crates lined the walls like silent sentinels. Weapons racks stood, at attention, each firearm a potential story of life and death. But Maria saw beyond the metal and gunpowder. She saw systems, mechanisms, the poetry of engineering that most people missed entirely. Her path hadn't been traditional. While other girls her age were dreaming of college or local jobs, Maria was competing in shooting competitions, breaking records that left seasoned marksmen speechless. By 16, she was winning regional competitions. By 18, she was a national-level competitive shooter with a reputation that preceded her. But reputation was a double-edged sword in her world. The competitive shooting circuit had been brutal. Male competitors who saw her as an intruder. Judges who looked for any excuse to dock her points. Sponsors who were more interested in her potential as a marketing image than her actual skills. Maria learned quickly that being good wasn't enough. She had to be extraordinary. Her mechanical engineering degree wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a weapon. While others saw firearms as tools of destruction, Maria saw them as complex systems of interaction, each part working in perfect, calculated harmony. Her thesis had been a groundbreaking analysis of weapon mechanics that had caught the attention of several military research departments. But life had other plans. Family obligations called her back to her hometown. Her mother's health was failing, medical bills were mounting, and the competitive shooting sponsorships weren't enough. So she took this job, a civilian contractor, in a military warehouse, loading magazines, managing inventory, doing the invisible work that kept military operations running. Most would have seen it as a step down. Maria saw it as another battlefield. Every magazine she loaded was a promise. To her grandfather's legacy, to her mother's medical treatments, to herself. Each round pressed into place was a calculated act of survival, of providing, of maintaining control in a world that constantly threatened to spiral into chaos. The warehouse workers around her were a mix, some veterans, some fresh recruits, some lifers who had seen more than they'd ever speak about. They moved around her with a mixture of respect and curiosity. They'd heard whispers about the woman who could field strip weapons faster than most could load them, who understood the internal mechanics of firearms like they were living, breathing entities. Maria didn't talk much. She didn't need to. Her hands did all the speaking necessary. As the morning light grew stronger, Filtering through the dust-laden air, she continued her work. Magazine after magazine, round after round, each movement precise, each action deliberate. She was creating order out of potential chaos, preparing equipment that might one day mean the difference between life and death for someone she'd never meet. This was her world, her battlefield, her silent revolution. And she was just getting started. Commander Jack Hawthorne moved like a ghost through the warehouse, his presence a controlled storm of military precision. Decorated SEALs didn't just walk. They prowled, each step calculated, each glance a potential threat assessment. He wasn't here by accident. Intelligence reports, whispered conversations, and a network of contacts had led him to this moment, to this warehouse, to her. Maria felt his eyes before she saw them. The weight of professional assessment bore down on her shoulders, a feeling she knew all too well. But where others saw a warehouse worker, Hawthorne saw something more, something dangerous. The warehouse was a cathedral of military logistics, its metal shelves rising like industrial columns, stacked with ammunition, weapons, and the silent potential of conflict. Most saw these as mere supplies. Hawthorne saw them as pieces of a complex geopolitical chess game. His background wasn't just decorated. It was legendary. Multiple tours in the most challenging theaters of modern warfare. Special operations that existed only in classified whispers. Commander Hawthorne was the kind of operator who didn't just execute missions. He redefined what was possible. Intelligence gathering wasn't about brute force. It was about seeing the invisible connections. And something about Maria Rodriguez had caught his attention. The reports had been intriguing. Competitive shooting records that defied standard performance metrics. A mechanical engineering background that suggested more than academic excellence. Whispers from Border Patrol veterans about her grandfather's complex history. Hawthorne didn't believe in coincidences. Every detail was a potential indicator of deeper potential. His approach to the warehouse wasn't random. Each step was a calculated assessment. The way workers moved, the precise inventory management, the subtle interactions that most would miss. And then there was Maria. She wasn't just loading magazines. She was conducting a systematic interaction with complex mechanical systems. Her hands moved with a precision that spoke of something deeper than training. This was intuitive understanding. Military intelligence wasn't about finding people who could follow orders. It was about finding individuals who could rewrite operational paradigms. Maria continued her work, unaware of the intense scrutiny, but she wasn't oblivious. Years of competitive shooting and her grandfather's lessons had trained her to be aware of her environment. She knew she was being watched, but she didn't change her rhythm, didn't alter her movements. Hawthorne appreciated that. Most would become nervous, would telegraph their awareness. She remained consistent, precise, the warehouse workers around. Her moved with typical industrial rhythm. But Maria was different. Each movement was a calculated interaction with the mechanical world around her. He'd seen exceptional operators before. Special Forces personnel who could execute missions with surgical precision. Technical experts who understood complex systems. But Maria Rodriguez represented something different. A living system. An adaptive mechanism that defied standard operational categories. Hawthorne's mission wasn't just observation. It was assessment. Recruitment wasn't about finding skilled individuals. It was about identifying potential that could reshape entire operational landscapes. Maria Rodriguez was about to become much more than a warehouse worker. She was about to become a weapon, not in the traditional sense, but in a way that would redefine human operational potential. The moment Commander Jack Hawthorne spoke, the entire warehouse seemed to contract. His voice wasn't just a sound, it was a tactical instrument designed to cut through ambient noise and command immediate attention. "Rodriguez," he called, each syllable weighted with military precision. Maria's response was instantaneous, not a startle, but a calculated shift. Years of competitive shooting had trained her to react without telegraphing her movements. She turned, her body moving with the fluid economy of someone who understood that every motion carried information. The workbench between them wasn't just a piece of industrial furniture. It was a battleground, a proving ground, a space where reputations would be forged or shattered in mere moments. The HK416 lay there, a predatory piece of engineering that seemed to breathe with potential energy. This wasn't just any rifle. This was a weapon system that had seen action in some of the most challenging theaters of modern warfare. Navy SEALs didn't carry just weapons. They carried precision instruments of national security. Commander Hawthorne's eyes never wavered. Those eyes had seen combat in places most people couldn't find on a map. They'd assessed threats in milliseconds, made life-and-death decisions in the space between heartbeats. Now, they were entirely focused on Maria. "Fieldstrip this," he said. It wasn't a request. It wasn't even a command, really. It was a challenge, wrapped in a professional directive. The warehouse around them seemed to hold its breath. A dozen workers, contractors, and military personnel suddenly found themselves frozen in place. Some recognized the HK416, knew its reputation for complexity. Others knew Commander Hawthorne, understood that this was more than a routine equipment check. Maria's hands hovered over the weapon, but her mind was already mapping its internal architecture. She saw beyond the metal and polymer, into the intricate dance of springs, pins, and mechanisms that made the rifle more than just a tool of war. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. "A weapon is a story, Mia. Learn to read its language, and you'll never be caught unprepared." The competitive shooting competitions had been brutal training grounds. Hours of disassembly and reassembly, pushing her speeds to impossible limits. But this was different. This wasn't about a trophy or a score. This was about proving her worth in a world that rarely gave second chances. Commander Hawthorne knew exactly what he was doing. This wasn't a random test. Intelligence operatives didn't do random. Every action was calculated, every moment designed to reveal something deeper. Maria's fingers touched the HK416. Immediately, she registered its weight, its balance. This wasn't a new weapon. This was a rifle that had stories etched into its very metal. Slight scratches near the bolt carrier group spoke of multiple deployments. A barely perceptible wear pattern on the stock suggested extended use in harsh environments. Most would see a weapon. She saw a complete narrative. Her hands began to move, not frantically, not with unnecessary drama, but with a surgical precision that transformed the complex act of disassembly into something close to art. The first pin came out with a practiced touch, not forced, not hesitant, just perfect. The bolt carrier group would be next, a section that separated many novices from true professionals. Each movement was a conversation with the weapon, a negotiation of mechanical principles. Commander Hawthorne's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. This wasn't just observation anymore. This was recognition. Around them, the warehouse workers had gone completely silent. Some had seen weapon disassembly before, but this was different. This was watching someone translate a complex mechanical language in real time. Maria's mind was a computational matrix. Each movement calculated, each motion anticipating the next. Micro-challenge the HK416 might present. This wasn't just muscle memory. This was pure, applied engineering brought to life through human skill. The competitive shooting world had taught her speed. Her mechanical engineering background had taught her understanding. Her family history had taught her survival. Now, She was about to prove why she was different. One pin, another removed. The bolt carrier group sliding free with a precision that seemed to defy the very laws of mechanical interaction. Commander Hawthorne knew he was witnessing something exceptional. Not just skill, but a rare combination of technical understanding and intuitive mechanical empathy that couldn't be taught in any military school or engineering program. Maria Rodriguez wasn't just field stripping a weapon. She was telling a story of survival, of precision, of a lifetime spent understanding the language of complex systems. And she was just getting started. Time fractured. 29 seconds wasn't just a measurement. It was an eruption of human potential, a surgical strike of mechanical precision that would redefine everything. The first milliseconds were deceptive. To the untrained eye, Maria's hands might have seemed to blur. But those who understood, truly understood, saw something far more complex. Each movement was a calculated algorithm, a symphony of mechanical intelligence that transformed the HK416 from a unified weapon into its constituent parts. Commander Hawthorne's world existed in microscopic increments. Combat had taught him to measure moments in the space between heartbeats, to see potential in the most infinitesimal of movements. And what he was witnessing was nothing short of extraordinary. The first pin dropped with a precision that was almost musical. Not a clatter, not a clang. Just a soft, controlled descent that spoke volumes about control. Most operators would fumble, would create noise, would betray their own nervousness. Maria's touch was different. Each component was a delicate instrument being handled with a surgeon's grace. The bolt carrier group came free next. This was where most would hesitate. The HK416's mechanism was notoriously complex, a labyrinth of engineering that had frustrated even seasoned armors. But Maria's fingers moved like they were reading a language only she could understand. Springs tensed and released, the metallic components singing a silent song of mechanical perfection. Around her, the warehouse workers had stopped everything. Clipboards hung suspended. Coffee mugs remained mid-lift. Breath seemed to collectively pause. 29 seconds wasn't just a number. It was a declaration of war against mediocrity. Her grandfather's lessons echoed in every movement. Manuel Rodriguez hadn't just taught her how to handle weapons. He'd taught her to see them as living systems, as complex organisms with their own internal logic. Where others saw metal and springs, she saw poetry. Where others heard mechanical interactions, she heard a language. The firing pin emerged next. Most would rush this moment. Most would risk damaging the delicate component. But Maria's touch was clinical, almost gentle. Each piece was being liberated, not torn apart. The firing pin caught the warehouse's industrial lighting, glinting like a precision instrument, which, of course, it was. Commander Hawthorne's military background had exposed him to the world's best. Special forces operators from multiple continents. Technical experts who could field strip weapons in impressive times. But this was different. This wasn't just speed. This was understanding transformed into motion. 12 seconds in, and half the weapon was already disassembled. Her competitive shooting background wasn't just about hitting targets. It was about understanding systems under pressure, about maintaining absolute control when everything demanded chaos. Each competition, each practice session, had been a preparation for moments exactly like this. The trigger assembly came free, with a movement so smooth it seemed to defy physical laws. No hesitation, no struggle, just pure, applied mechanical intelligence. 17 seconds. Sweat didn't form on her brow. Her breathing remained constant. This wasn't effort for her. This was breathing. This was existing. The barrel separated from the receiver with a precision that made it look effortless. But those who truly understood knew This was the result of thousands of hours of practice, of a lifetime spent understanding the language of mechanical systems. 22 seconds. Commander Hawthorne's military intelligence background had taught him to assess potential in microseconds. Recruitment wasn't just about skills. It was about seeing the invisible, the potential that existed between the measurable moments, the final components separated, each piece laid out with mathematical precision, not just disassembled, displayed, like an anatomical study of mechanical perfection. 29 seconds. Exact, precise, absolute. The warehouse erupted. Not with applause, not with words, but with a collective understanding that they had just witnessed something extraordinary. Commander Hawthorne's eyes told the real story. This wasn't just impressive. This was potential weaponized into human form. Maria Rodriguez hadn't just field-stripped an HK416. She had just changed her entire destiny. 29 seconds. A lifetime. Compressed into a moment of pure mechanical poetry. The interrogation room was nothing like the warehouse. Sterile white walls, a single metal table, fluorescent lights that seemed to strip away every shadow of privacy. But Maria Rodriguez wasn't intimidated. She'd been prepared for moments like these her entire life. Commander Hawthorne sat across from her, a manila folder open between them. Not a typical debrief. This was something else entirely. "Tell me about Manuel Rodriguez," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a calculated probe. The name hung in the air, a ghost of memories that Maria had carefully compartmentalized for years. Her grandfather wasn't just a man. He was a legend whispered in the quiet corners of Border Patrol history, a figure who existed in the liminal spaces between official records and local folklore. Manuel Rodriguez had been more than a Border Patrol agent. He was a living contradiction, a man who understood violence but taught precision, a Mexican-American who had navigated the most dangerous stretches of the Arizona-Mexico border during some of its most turbulent decades. The story began in a small, dust-blown town where the border was more of a suggestion than a definitive line. Manuel had started as a young Border Patrol agent in the late 1970s, a time when the border was a raw, unpredictable landscape of human struggle and political tension. He wasn't just protecting the border, Maria began, her voice steady. He was protecting a way of life. Her memories unfolded like a complex mechanical system, each recollection precisely connected to the next. Manuel had been more than a law enforcement officer. He was a technical expert, a man who understood that survival meant understanding systems, whether those systems were human migrations, weapon mechanics, or the complex ecosystem of the border region. The Rodriguez family had deep roots in both sides of the border. Her grandfather's stories weren't just about confrontations. They were intricate narratives of human survival, of understanding the mechanical and human systems that govern survival. "He taught me that a weapon is more than a tool," Maria continued. "It's a complex system. Every part has a purpose. Every interaction matters." Her competitive shooting career hadn't been a choice. It had been a continuation of her grandfather's legacy. While other teenagers were planning college applications, Maria was learning to field-strip rifles blindfolded, understanding the minute tolerances that separated exceptional skill from ordinary competence. The competitive shooting circuit had been her proving ground, a world dominated by men who saw her as an interloper. But Maria wasn't just competing. She was conducting a scientific study of human potential. Her mechanical engineering degree wasn't a standard academic pursuit. It was a weapon. Where others saw theoretical concepts, she saw practical applications. Her thesis had been a groundbreaking analysis of weapon mechanics that had caught the attention of several military research departments. Commander Hawthorne listened, not just hearing her words, but reading between them. Intelligence operatives didn't just collect information. They assembled complex puzzles from seemingly unrelated pieces. Your grandfather was more than a boarder. A troll agent, Hawthorne stated. It wasn't a question. Maria's eyes met his. A silent acknowledgement passed between them. Manuel Rodriguez had been a shadow operator, someone who existed in the most dangerous intersections of law enforcement, border security, and something more complex. The stories she'd grown up with weren't just family legends. They were carefully coded narratives of survival, of understanding systems that most people never saw. Her grandfather had survived cartel encounters, border tensions, internal departmental politics. He'd taught Maria that survival wasn't about strength. It was about understanding, about seeing the invisible connections that most people missed. He always said, Maria's voice carried her grandfather's exact intonation, "Mia, the most dangerous weapon is the one that understands its own mechanism." The interrogation room seemed to contract. Commander Hawthorne wasn't just hearing a story. He was witnessing the unfolding of a legacy. Maria Rodriguez wasn't just a warehouse worker. She wasn't just a competitive shooter or a mechanical engineer. She was a system. A complex, precisely calibrated human mechanism forged in the most challenging of environments. Her grandfather's lessons weren't just about weapons or borders. They were about understanding the invisible systems that govern human potential. 29 seconds in a warehouse had just become the culmination of a multi-generational story of survival, precision, and extraordinary potential. And this was only the beginning. The classified briefing room was a world unto itself. Concrete walls lined with soundproofing, screens that could switch from transparent to opaque with a single command, and an atmosphere that felt charged with potential energy. This wasn't just a meeting. This was a recruitment that would redefine entire operational paradigms. Commander Jack Hawthorne wasn't alone. Surrounding the massive oval table were representatives from departments most people didn't know existed. Intelligence communities that operated in the shadows, where information was the most deadly weapon. Rodriguez isn't just a candidate, Hawthorne began, his digital presentation flickering to life. Images of Maria's competitive shooting records, her engineering thesis, the warehouse incident, all mapped out with surgical precision. She's a complete system. The room understood system warfare, not just military engagement, but the complex interplay of human potential, technical expertise, and adaptive intelligence. Dr. Elena Reyes, a senior technical advisor from DARPA, leaned forward. Her reputation was built on identifying human potential before it could be fully realized. 29 seconds, she muttered, studying Maria's weapon disassembly video. Most operators take 3 to 4 minutes. She's operating at a completely different cognitive level. The recruitment wasn't about filling a position. It was about acquiring a living weapon system. Maria sat in a separate preparation room, unaware of the conversations happening behind sealed doors. But she wasn't nervous. Preparation was her native language. Years of competitive shooting, mechanical engineering, and her grandfather's lessons had taught her that opportunity was just another mechanical system waiting to be understood. Inside the briefing room, the conversation delved deeper. Her background is a tactical asset, a senior CI. A operative spoke up. Border town upbringing, competitive shooting circuit, mechanical engineering with a focus on complex systems. Her grandfather's border patrol history. This isn't just a recruit. This is a generational infiltration point. Hawthorne's presentation continued. Each slide peeled back another layer of Maria Rodriguez's potential. Her competitive shooting records showed more than just accuracy. They revealed a mind that could process complex environmental variables in milliseconds. Her engineering thesis wasn't just an academic exercise. It was a blueprint for understanding mechanical systems at their most fundamental level. Dr. Reyes pulled up additional data. Look at her adaptive response metrics. Most technical experts operate within predefined parameters. Rodriguez rewrites the parameters in real time. The recruitment wasn't about military roles. It was about finding someone who could exist in the spaces between traditional operational boundaries. We're not talking about a standard recruitment, Hawthorne emphasized. We're looking at a complete operational integration, technical analysis, field adaptation, tactical understanding that goes beyond traditional military training. The room understood what remained unspoken. Maria Rodriguez represented a new kind of operational asset, not just a soldier, not just a technical expert, but a complete system of human potential. Her background told a story of survival, growing. Up in a border town, her competitive shooting wasn't a hobby. It was survival training. Her mechanical engineering wasn't just an academic pursuit. It was a method of understanding complex systems. The CI operative spoke again. Her grandfather's history is particularly interesting. Manuel Rodriguez wasn't just a border patrol agent. He was an unofficial operator who understood the most complex human systems, migration patterns, cartel movements, cross-border dynamics. Dr. Reyes pulled up additional psychological profiles. She's not just skilled, she's adaptive. Most technical experts become rigid. She rewrites her own operational parameters continuously. The recruitment process was transforming into something more profound. This wasn't about hiring. This was about acquiring a living, breathing operational system. We're looking at a complete package, Hawthorne concluded. Technical expertise, psychological adaptability, generational understanding of complex operational environments. Maria waited, not with anxiety, but with the same precise calculation she brought to weapon disassembly. Opportunity was just another system waiting to be understood. The door would open soon, and everything would change, not just for her, but for the entire operational landscape. 29 seconds in a warehouse had just become the moment that would redefine what was possible. Recruitment wasn't the right word. This was activation. The training facility wasn't on any map. Nestled deep in the Arizona desert, it was more than a training ground. It was an alchemical forge where human potential was reshaped, reimagined, reborn. Maria Rodriguez stood at the center of a complex that looked like a hybrid between a military base, a technical research center, and something from the edges of scientific imagination. This wasn't standard military training. This was systematic human optimization. Day one began before dawn, not with physical exercises, but with a comprehensive diagnostic that made her previous engineering assessments look like elementary school math. Dr. Elena Reyes watched from behind a one-way glass, her team of behavioral scientists and technical experts monitoring every microscopic response. She's not just processing, one of the lead researchers muttered, watching Maria's brain scan. She's rewriting the entire operational algorithm in real time. The first phase was psychological deconstruction, not breaking, expanding. Where traditional training sought to create uniformity, this program aimed to amplify Maria's unique operational potential. Cognitive assessments that would have crushed most candidates became her playground. Complex system simulations that typically required entire teams, she solved with a combination of intuitive leap and mathematical precision. Her mechanical engineering background wasn't just an asset. It was her primary operational language. Weapons training was nothing like she'd experienced before. Each firearm became a complex mathematical problem, not just about hitting targets, about understanding the entire ballistic ecosystem. Wind resistance, molecular friction, gravitational variances. Most shooters aimed. Maria calculated entire atmospheric interactions. Commander Hawthorne oversaw her advanced tactical training. Personally, he'd seen exceptional operators before, But Maria was different. She didn't just learn systems. She became the system. Most operators are trained to follow protocols, he told Dr. Reyes during one of their strategic reviews. Rodriguez doesn't follow protocols. She generates them. The physical training was brutal, but brutality implied limitation. This was systematic human optimization. Every exercise was a complex algorithm designed to expand her operational potential. Her competitive shooting background became just another foundational layer. Where she once competed against other shooters, now she was competing against the fundamental limitations of human performance. Language training wasn't about memorization. It was about understanding cultural systems. Linguistic nuances became another mechanical system to be decoded. She wasn't just learning languages. She was learning how human communication operated. As a complex, adaptive network, psychological profiling revealed something extraordinary. Most operators had specialized skills. Maria had a meta skill, the ability to rapidly understand and adapt to any complex system. Her grandfather's border patrol stories weren't just memories. They were operational training manuals. Survival isn't about strength, she would repeat, echoing Manuel Rodriguez's lessons. It's about understanding the invisible connections. The facility became her entire world, a world of constant adaptation, constant optimization. Cyber warfare modules that would have overwhelmed most technical experts became her computational playground. She didn't just understand code. She saw the underlying systemic logic of digital interactions. Hand-to-hand combat training transformed into a study of biomechanical systems. Each movement wasn't just about defeating an opponent. It was about understanding the entire physical interaction as a complex, mathematical problem. Dr. Race's team watched in fascination. She's not just learning, one researcher noted. She's evolving the entire concept of human operational potential. Months passed, but time was just another system to be understood, to be manipulated. Her competitive shooting skills became just a foundational layer of a much more complex operational capability. Where she once broke records in shooting competitions, now she was rewriting the entire conceptual framework of human performance. The final assessment wasn't a test. It was a complete operational simulation that would have crushed entire specialized teams. Maria didn't just complete the simulation. She reimagined it. Commander Hawthorne watched the final evaluation, a rare smile crossing his typically stoic expression. She's not just an operator, he said to Dr. Reyes. She's an entire line operational. Paradigm. Transformation wasn't the right word. This was evolution. And Maria Rodriguez was its living embodiment. The extraction point wasn't on any official map. A remote location where 3 international borders converged. A geographical scene where geopolitical tensions were measured in heartbeats rather than miles. Maria Rodriguez wasn't just an operator. She was a living weapon system, a culmination of generations of survival, technical precision, and adaptive intelligence. Her mission brief was intentionally sparse. In the world of advanced intelligence, operations, information was a weapon more dangerous than any firearm. What she knew was exactly what she needed to know. Nothing more, nothing less. The target was a complex network of technological infrastructure critical to multiple geopolitical interests. Not a simple elimination, not a standard infiltration. This was a systemic disruption that would reshape entire operational landscapes. Her equipment was nothing like standard military gear. Each piece was a custom-engineered extension of her own capabilities. The HK416 she'd field-stripped in that warehouse now felt like a natural extension of her body, not a weapon, but a computational interface. Commander Hawthorne's final briefing echoed in her mind. "You're not just completing a mission," he had said. "You're rewriting operational paradigms." The border region was familiar territory. not just geographically, but systemically. This was the landscape her grandfather had navigated decades ago. Where others saw a hostile environment, Maria saw a complex adaptive system waiting to be understood. Her approach wasn't about confrontation. It was about systematic infiltration. The first phase began with digital reconnaissance. Most operators would use standard cyber intrusion techniques. Maria rewrote the entire approach. She didn't just breach systems, she became the system. Her mechanical engineering background transformed digital infiltration into a form of complex systems analysis. Firewalls weren't obstacles. They were puzzles waiting to be solved. Encryption wasn't a barrier. It was a language to be understood. Hours of preparation collapsed into moments of execution. The first security layer fell without a sound, not through brute force, but through a sophisticated understanding of systemic vulnerabilities that most technical experts couldn't comprehend. Her grandfather's lessons about border survival translated perfectly into this new operational landscape. Understanding systems, seeing the invisible connections, moving with purpose, not just movement. The mission wasn't about destruction. It was about precise surgical intervention that would reshape entire operational networks. Communication systems went dark, not through traditional jamming, but through a sophisticated digital manipulation that would take months to fully understand. Maria moved like a ghost, but not the traditional tactical definition. She was a living algorithm, adapting to each new environmental input with mathematical precision. Her competitive shooting background became just another computational layer. Where most operators saw tactical positioning, she saw complex probability. Matrices. Each movement was a calculated solution to a multivariable problem. The primary target was a technological infrastructure hub, but the real mission was far more complex, disrupting a network that operated at the intersection of multiple geopolitical interests. Hours collapsed into moments of pure operational potential. When the mission concluded, nothing looked disturbed. No traditional markers of intervention. Just a subtle shift in complex systemic interactions that would take months to fully comprehend. Commander Hawthorne's encrypted communication was brief. Mission accomplished. Systemic parameters reset. But Maria understood the deeper implication. This wasn't just a mission completed. This was a new operational paradigm demonstrated. Her grandfather's lessons about survival. Her competitive shooting precision. Her mechanical engineering understanding. Her advanced intelligence training. Everything had been preparation for this moment. The extraction was as precise as her initial weapon disassembly. 29 seconds in a warehouse had been the beginning. This mission was the culmination. She wasn't just an operator. She was a living, breathing evolutionary step in human operational potential. The border region absorbed her return like it had absorbed countless stories before. Another ghost. Another legend. But those who truly understood knew. This was something entirely new.